A quick thank you to today's sponsor Bombus for once again supporting the channel. And in case you somehow haven't heard, Bombus is a comfort-focused premium basics brand that makes the comfiest socks I have ever had. They've got built-in arch support, no annoying toe seams, and premium materials like merino wool and extra long staple cotton. Somehow they're striking that magical balance between comfort and durability. Now, as I said in my last video, Bombus is a purpose-driven brand, specifically in a space that's personal to me as someone who experienced homelessness in my youth. Socks are the most requested clothing item in shelters, number 2 and 3 being underwear and shirts, all of which Bombus makes, and for every item that you purchase, Bombus donates to someone in need. One purchased equals one donated. In fact, they have donated over 100 million clothing items to people experiencing homelessness, working with over 3,500 giving partners across the US. Now, having said all that, if you do give Bombus a try and for whatever reason you aren't satisfied, every purchase is backed by their 100% happiness guarantee, which has you covered with free returns and exchanges. Feel good and do good with Bombus. New customers can get 20% off their first purchase by going to bombus.com/raimbot and using promo code RAINBOT at checkout. Again, that's bombus.com/raimbot and code RAINBOT for 20% off. And with that said, let's begin. So, A Cult is a movie that I watched years and years ago and felt compelled to share here because, at least in my opinion, it is criminally overlooked. Unlike most found footage or mockumentary films, which typically focus on ghosts or hauntings, A Cult is utterly unpredictable. Think alien talk, UFOs, bizarre worm-like balls in the sky, missing people, electronics materializing out of nowhere, and cryptic ancient symbols. At its core is an unassuming man who becomes increasingly unsettling as the documentary team delves deeper into his story, and the ending? It is one of the most unhinged conclusions that I have ever seen, and for others who have also seen this film, well, they either love or absolutely hate the ending. This movie is definitely not for everyone, but if you're up for something quite unique, I highly recommend watching A Cult, ideally before this video, as spoilers are ahead. Sadly, there's no official way to rent or stream it, at least in the US, as far as I am aware, but it is available on YouTube. Now, for those of you who do not mind spoilers, what happens in A Cult? The story begins with director Koji Shiraishi, who's out to make a documentary about a seemingly random attack that took place on a bridge 3 years prior. Shiraishi is the director of this film playing himself, and in case you've never heard of him, you may have heard of some of his other films like Noroi the Curse, Carved, or Sadako vs. Kayako. Fictionalized Shiraishi says that he felt compelled to document the event in question, but can't really articulate why, at least not right now, but we'll return to this later. Through exposition and a series of interviews, we learn that the attack took the lives of 2 people and seriously injured 1. Said sole survivor, 30-year-old Shohei Eno, is odd, to say the very least. In their first interview with him, he starts talking about hearing voices and seeing UFOs, that sort of thing. Something that might have been easy to discount until he offered to show the crew the scars that he got from the attack. Now, these scars clearly resemble some kind of esoteric symbol, and of course, the only person who'd be able to explain them is the person who made them. But immediately following the attacks, he made his way to the nearby ocean and was never seen again. Upon interviewing the attacker's friends and family, however, they learned that this man was also very much into UFOs, and even more bizarrely, had the same symbol on his own body. Now, was it a tattoo? Self-inflicted? No. His father tells the crew that his son was actually born with these marks on his chest. The plot thickens when the documentary team reviews footage from that fateful day and notice this weird speck flying around in the sky. Naturally, they show it to Eno, who then rambles on about how he considered the attack to be an act of God and not something that he's resentful about. In fact, he's claiming he's seen numerous miracles occur since that day, although when asked to elaborate, he refuses. Now out for answers, director Shiraishi decides to follow Eno around and film him as much as possible. It's at this point when a microscope is placed on Eno and we get to know him much better. He's still very strange, but ultimately seems harmless, albeit very much down on his luck. He's broke, homeless, and at one point even asked Shiraishi to borrow 100 yen, which at the time of writing this comes out to about 67 cents US. Eventually, the team decides to pay Eno to film himself when Shiraishi is unable to. They also ask Eno about the voice that he claimed to be hearing before, and to their disappointment, Eno says that he hasn't been able to understand it since his stay at the hospital. Of course, as things go on, Eno becomes increasingly more troubling. He has to stay at the office since he has no place to go, something that the crew is reluctant about, but accepts after Shiraishi convinces them that it is probably a good idea. At one point, they take Eno out for dinner where he orders a bunch of expensive cuts of meat, then proceeds to be rude to the female member of the crew, causing her to leave. Most alarming though, Eno, now drunk at the restaurant, starts going on about the voice in his head telling him about some kind of mission and how he sees his experience on on the bridge as a passing of the baton. He talks about God and about being transported to what he calls God's realm. At this point, the documentary team lightly confront him, saying that if he admits to planning anything criminal, then they'd of course have a moral duty to intervene. Eno denies any such plans, despite later footage he shot of himself showing him saying, quote, "They have no idea what I'm up to," as he walks past a group of police. Now, as all of this is going on, there have been a number of seemingly paranormal phenomena captured on camera. When Shiraishi and Eno are eating at an unnamed fast food establishment that is surely not sporting the golden arches, a wrapper is blown off the table multiple times despite it being indoors with no visible windows or explanation. We also see a strange transparent mass looming above Eno the first time he tries to sleep at the documentary team's office. At this point in the story, we find Eno filming himself after a day of work when he captures videos of something in the sky. To him, a so-called UFO. After this, he returns to the office where he finds Shiraishi working alone. He doesn't mention the UFO, but maybe he didn't need to because this happens.
全然何も取らなかった。
まあまあ、気が強じゃない。
The documentary then shifts focus to Shiraishi's efforts to investigate further. Online, he discovers an artist who creates automatic drawings, one of which resembles Eno's scars. When they meet, the artist suddenly enters a trance-like state, scribbling an image resembling a rock formation at a place called Mount Ohiruyama, a place Shiraishi had actually visited 3 years earlier on the same day as the bridge incident, in fact. Returning to the mountain with a crew member, Shiraishi recounts that he once found 9 leeches attached to his leg here, despite the dry terrain, something that will come up a few more times throughout the story. While searching the area, they uncover a stone carved with symbols resembling those on both Eno as well as his attacker. Upon making this discovery, Shiraishi begins to feel pain and notices fresh bleeding from his old leech wounds. Now, to help decode these symbols, they consult one Kiyoshi Kurosawa, a real-life horror director playing a fictionalized version of himself that also happens to be a Mount Ohiruyama enthusiast. Kurosawa reveals similar carvings that he studied over 2 decades, interpreting them as signs of a god-ordained calamity. Whether natural or human-made, he can't exactly say right now. He connects the mountain to Hiruko, a mythological figure known as the Leech Child, and explains that the mountain's name, Ohiruyama, translates to Leech Mountain. We then turn our attention back to the office, where the crew go through Eno's stuff while he's out working a gig job. Everything seems normal until they find his checkbook, which shows that he actually has thousands of dollars stashed away in his account that he just for some reason refuses to use. They assume that it's for something, and whatever it is, it cannot be good. A few more supernatural things take place from Eno's POV, this time clearer than ever. The most notable being a man Eno gets into a confrontation with over his gig job, getting struck down by a car mere minutes after Eno claimed that it would happen. All the while, a strange mass was looming over his head. Several more of these are captured on camera over time. Eno shows the footage to the crew, who are, of course, left stunned. They ask him again about the voice in his head, to which he insists once more that he still cannot understand. Shortly after this, Shiraishi and Eno end up at the same restaurant as last time, and the two have a heart-to-heart. Shiraishi tells Eno that he actually wants to help him, even if he is planning something horrible, explaining that he wants to show everyone the truth about what they've uncovered, noting his feelings of being called to do so. Eno finally cuts the shit and admits that he could understand the voice in his head the entire time, as we all expected, and that it had been telling him over and over to do something very specific near Shibuya Station, which is of course incredibly dense and overcrowded. Now, I hate to go on a quick tangent here, but we all know that YouTube is really strict about stuff, and I really don't want this video to get thrown into the abyss of the algorithm, and I especially don't want it to get blocked or taken down, so bear with me here. So you know that episode of SpongeBob where Squidward gets a pie for SpongeBob, but before he does, the guys selling it to him tell him that they aren't actually pies? Yeah, those pies with explosively delicious flavor. Let's just say that Eno admits that his plan is to walk into a busy area and bless everyone with some free pie. Now, Shiraishi clearly is not a fan of pies, and reveals that he lied to Eno in an attempt to get him to confess. The two begin to argue, eventually ending up outside, where Eno is so drunk that he can barely walk. And that is when this happens. After witnessing all of these things up close and personal, Shiraishi finally seems to break. And it doesn't completely come out of nowhere. Right at the start of the story, he mentions feeling compelled to cover the bridge attack case, but can't explain why. Right now, it seems evident that Shiraishi was slowly being tempted this entire time, but was simply in denial over it. This also seemed evident because he's the only member of the documentary team that consistently backed Eno up, even when he was being rude or just downright sketchy. Eno walks up while Shiraishi is still quivering on the floor and asserts the idea that his one and only mission here is to keep a record of what Eno was about to do. At this moment, Shiraishi's leg is once again bleeding from the same spot described earlier, and Eno, upon seeing it, says that it is clearly his equivalent of the mark that Eno has on his back. Eno helps Shiraishi up, and just like that, their relationship is solidified. And from here, a lot happens very, very quickly. We watch as Eno gathers baking supplies and gets to cooking in the company office. At one point, Shiraishi even helps him hide everything from a crew member when they arrive unexpectedly. On the day of the pie distribution ceremony, the pair are up and about nearly 12 hours before the show is actually about to start. They go on to eat together, they go and see a screening of what totally is not Indiana Jones. Overall, they're just really palling around, and it's clear that they basically hit the peak of their bestie arc. Now, once it's finally time for pie, the two men sneak off somewhere private where Eno is able to suit up, and once the pies are secured safely under his jacket, they make their way outside and say their final goodbyes. Eno, before walking into the crowd, offers Shiraishi his 100 yen coin back. Shiraishi declines and says to return it alongside the camera that he's been using to film himself if he is able to do so from the other side. And with that, the two would never see each other again. Now, for obvious reasons, I cannot actually show you the pie distribution ceremony, but let's just say that everyone around him, hundreds of people to be exact, were just so overwhelmed by the aforementioned explosive flavors that they could barely hold themselves together. Again, imagination here. Now, what we get next is a massive, massive time skip to 21 years later, as Shiraishi is finally released from prison for helping Eno and not turning him into the authorities. Turns out, he was legally considered an accomplice, which I'm sure none of us are shocked by. He and his old producer from earlier catch up at a nearby restaurant, presumably the same one that we've seen a couple times already, and that's when, out of nowhere, Shiraishi's leg starts to hurt once again. He's clearly alarmed, and as he goes to check on it, something falls from the ceiling and just narrowly misses him. It's Eno's borrowed camera, and beneath it, a 100 yen coin, both of which are completely undamaged, pristine, when they should be covered in pie filling. Now, this is the footage that Shiraishi found on the tape recovered from the interdimensional camera.
借りっぱなしになって100円あるやんか。遅なったけど返してこう。これさ、ビデオカメラと一緒に、こっちのこのビデオカメラと一緒にこの100円玉も向こう側からこう送ってくれん？なんかその方が楽しい。分かった。行くわ。ほんまありがとう。
So yeah, that was a cult. Yes, it is incredibly ridiculous, but I honestly love it. The first time I saw that last clip, I was just stunned. Like, I had no idea what to even say, and I completely lost my shit when his head floated away, because when you have to edit that sort of thing, I mean, literally all you have to do is just drag it once, and that's about it. But I guess if we're trying to make sense of what all of that was, we can only assume that Enno ended up in some kind of hell, which, let's be real, I'm sure none of you are surprised by. Now, why was hell full of leeches and jellyfish? Honestly, for years, I had no idea and thought it came off as kind of completely random, albeit amazingly absurd imagery, but apparently it does have something to do with mythology. Fictionalized Kurosawa said that Hiruko was worshipped at Mount Ohiruyama. Again, Hiruko can mean leech child, apparently because this character was initially born without any limbs. Now, I will admit that I never heard of Hiruko before this, which is funny because apparently Hiruko is one of the 7 lucky gods, and my childhood home had multiple depictions of these characters. There were prints, little statues. I just somehow never asked my family the details about all these characters. Hiruko is apparently also known as Ebisu and can be associated with jellyfish as well. I guess that makes sense. I'm sure that there's like way more to this that we could dissect further, but I'll keep it short for today. Happy New Year and all that. Now, just to clarify, the stuff we saw in Occult aren't actual beliefs, just so no one mistakes that. They're fictionalized and simply taking inspiration from actual mythology. So yeah, I'm not 100% certain of the proper interpretation here, but my reading of it is that whatever these entities are, they're obviously bad, but they're being mistaken for Hiruko. All in all, I think that if you're willing to not take things too seriously, Occult is a really good film. It does feel very realistic and natural outside of all the weird wormy stuff, and it really is uneasy at times, especially before Enno fully comes out. It reminds me a little of Creep in the sense that I would never want to be a documentary filmmaker that's steadily getting more sketched out by my subject as time goes on. That just sounds impossibly uncomfortable. And of course, I also love how bold this film is, and it's one that I don't find I'm able to talk with a lot of people about because A, they've never seen it before, or B, it's just a little too out there. Now, hopefully this video finds its way to people who are looking for something like Occult, and if that's you, then hey, mission accomplished. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.